This week is all about change, and nowhere is that more apparent than on Capitol Hill. In 2 days' time, the 118th United States Congress starts in Washington with a divided Capitol. Democrats keep the Senate, but Republicans will run the House for the first time in 4 years. Former TV News anchor Mark Alford will become a freshman congressman for Missouri's 4th District, joining incumbents and longtime representatives from our 2 states. Alford tells us he's ready to get to work and says he's open to bipartisanship in this new Congress.
I think there are some things that we can come together on, but the Democrats are going to have to give. We have a new speaker coming into the House who's going to do things a different way. And if we can come together under this speaker, we can get things done.
On the other side of the Capitol, Missouri Attorney General Eric Schmitt will soon become a U.S. Senator, taking over for retiring Senator Roy Blunt, who spent decades in local, state, and federal politics. In his farewell address last month, Blunt made a point of trying to unite his colleagues.
You don't have to agree on everything to work together. You just have to agree on one thing. And if you find that one thing you agree on, and frankly, particularly if you're successful, both the members working together and their staffs think, well, gee, we could do that again.
Eric Schmitt will join Senator Josh Hawley in Missouri's delegation. Both politicians are deeply critical of the Biden administration and Democrats, who again have a slim majority in the U.S. Senate. So what should we expect? We have a lot to discuss. Here to tackle it all, please welcome our first guest of the new year, Brian Ellison, host contributor with KCUR. Brian, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you, Cody.
Thank you. Let's start with the departure and legacy of Senator Blunt, a longtime politician who spent a lot of time as of late kind of reminding lawmakers about the importance of reaching across the aisle to work together.
Yeah, I think the loss of Senator Blunt from the Missouri delegation is going to be very deeply felt. He was known for being not necessarily a moderate, Cody, because he was actually quite conservative on the issues, right, and if you look at his voting record, but for being someone who was willing to work across the aisle. You heard him speaking there about his willingness to find one thing he agreed with from every other senator, and that's not something you're hearing a lot of in those newly elected to the Senate, including Senator-elect Eric Schmitt.
Yeah, let's talk about that, because he branded himself as the America First candidate, right? A Trump-backed Republican. I know this week is kind of the honeymoon period,
sure,
where everybody plays nice, right? Talks a good game to a point. But do you think Senator Schmitt will take Senator Blunt's advice on bipartisanship here?
Well, I think time will tell, right? So far, that isn't the kind of campaign he ran. He ran every day saying how he would talking about his record of suing the Biden administration as Missouri's Attorney General and how he would be challenging the Biden administration as a senator. That's fairly consistent with what Senator Josh Hawley is already doing, representing Missouri in the Senate. I have to say it would represent something of a turn from his campaign rhetoric if that is the kind of senator that Eric Schmitt becomes.
Do you think they lean on him for the investigation arm of this? Because many Republicans have said this is going to be all about investigations in the new Congress.
That is possible, although because Republicans don't control the U.S. Senate, Democrats maintain their majority, Eric Schmitt's ability to have that kind of dialogue and that kind of control of the conversation is going to be limited.
Yeah, we'll see what the rhetoric's like. Let's talk about the House, though. Big changes in leadership there are coming this week. Along with the new class coming in, Republicans will run House committees. That does affect our local delegation, right?
It absolutely does. Perhaps most significantly, the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee looks like it's prepared to be led by Congressman Sam Graves. He's from the 6th District, represents part of Kansas City's Northland, but actually the entire northern third of the state of Missouri is represented by Sam Graves. He's been a quiet ranking Republican on that committee, quiet for the most part. His press releases generally point to the kinds of appropriations he's able to secure for the district and for the state of Missouri. He's very interested in Amtrak and train transportation, in airline regulations. He has not been particularly combative. It will be interesting to see whether when he is in charge of that committee it takes on more of an aggressive oversight role, or if it continues to be primarily about getting into the nitty-gritty of how money is being spent and how companies are being regulated by the government.
Could we potentially see more Missouri, more Kansas, more local issues in the spotlight because of this appointment?
I think we will, particularly in that transportation and infrastructure sphere. I mean, think about the shift that it represents for Republicans to be in control of the House. Emanuel Cleaver, Kansas City's congressman, no longer in the majority. Sharice Davids, who's made a lot of headlines even in her first couple of years in the House, no longer in the majority. Instead, I think a lot of focus will be on congressmen like Sam Graves.
Right, and Representative Davids came on the broadcast earlier last year and told me that she worked to get on the House Agriculture Committee, right, because her district changed and there were more rural voters there. Do you think she stays in that capacity?
Yeah, I talked with her spokesperson about that this week, that she is going to try to stay. The incoming Republican leadership has not yet announced the ratios, that is the number of Republicans and Democrats that will serve on each committee. She's one of the less senior members of the House, so if some Democrat gets bumped from the committee, it could be Sharice Davids, but she said that she's going to try to maintain all of her committee assignments: agriculture, transportation, and small business.
All right, you know, as we get into the new year, of course, the economy is still top of mind. It's going to be for a while. Prices and interest rates are very high. We're seeing that here at home. What will you be watching for as this new Congress gets underway?
Well, I think the question is how much legislation, really of any kind, including legislation about the economy, is able to get through, with Democrats controlling the Senate, Republicans controlling the House, particularly the kinds of things that some Republican leaders are saying they will focus on in the House, mainly oversight and investigation of the Biden administration. It's hard to know how much legislation of any kind will pass. I have a feeling, Cody, that we'll be talking about sort of last-minute budget proposals and spending proposals about a year from now.
Second verse, same as the first,
Right.
maybe. All right, Brian Ellison, thank you.